Hello, I'm Julie Swenson, Managing Director of Forward Theater Company in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Mike Fisher, Milwaukee-based theater writer and dramaturg.
I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company. And this is Theater Forward, a twice-monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insight into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 44 of Theater Forward.
Yes, great to be here.
So for this episode, we are thrilled to welcome Jared Clarkin, the production manager for Milwaukee Repertory Theater, to talk with us about the planning and the protocols that they've dug into to make it possible to return to live performance. Thank you so much for being here, Jared.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Just to sort of get us started, tell me a little bit about your history with Milwaukee Repertory Theater.
Sure. So this is my sixth season with Milwaukee Repertory Theater. Since my time there, we have designed and built a brand new Christmas Carol. As we're approaching the holidays this year, we're approaching a slightly scaled back version in the times of COVID here. But it's been a great ride. We've done a lot of really cool things, developing new plays and really trying to refine our processes here and, deliver quality theater in the heart of the Midwest.
And can you tell us a little about sort of where things were at the Rep when COVID kind of took over all of our lives? And I know you guys were really quick on the draw getting some filmed content out there. So can you just describe a little what those early weeks were like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, heading into the beginning of 2020, we were firing on all cylinders. We were looking at, expanding some of our staffing and really digging into engagement with the community and expanding our production capabilities. And, it was pretty much out of the blue when all of this happened and really needed to figure out what those next steps were going to be. So in probably less than a week, we pivoted from just opening a production of Eclipsed to hiring a video production company to come up from Chicago so that we could capture that on video. And be able to distribute it out to our patrons because we were just in our first week of public performances at that point. And we were in rehearsal for, I believe, 2 other shows that we needed to close down pretty quickly and try and get those actors and cast and crew members back home safely. So it was a pretty fast pivot to, getting most of our staff into remote working and closing down most of our physical operations starting in the middle of March.
Yeah.
Jared, a lot of people have been, a lot of companies are hopefully going to get to rehearse at some point in the near future in person, maybe tech in person, maybe have a small audience. For Forward Theater, that's a little bit further off. There are safety plans that are being regulated by Actors Equity Association. And the Milwaukee Rep is going to be one of the first in this state to bring people live into a rehearsal room and do a show. But boy, there were an awful lot of things that had to happen before you were able to do that. And while I know you did this incredible webinar that gave us the full scope of what it took to get where you are right now, can you give us an overview? And I especially want to know what prompted you all to say, you know what, we're going to tackle this safety plan and we're going to get people in a rehearsal room.
That's a great question. Really, this all started probably back in April when we started trying to figure out what this impact was going to have. We came up with probably 5 or 6 different scenarios as to, how our season would play out this year. And while we were doing that budgeting process, we quickly realized that safety was going to be our number one priority and trying to figure out how to deal with that component. luckily, the folks that work at the Rep have connections with theater professionals across the country. And, if there is one thing that theater is good for, it's collaboration. And we reached out to a lot of folks in different states and cities just to find out how they were approaching it, and really started to take bits and pieces from other people's safety plans and fold them into ours. The first step is making sure that when we bring people back into the building, we can do that safely. So the first step we did was develop screening protocols for getting into the building. So that's temperature taking, and then essentially a short list of questions to identify if you've been in an area with high rates of COVID, and if you've come into contact with somebody who's tested positive or somebody who's symptomatic, and basically keep those folks out of the workplace so we can try and secure the building as best as possible. And then from there, it was really just diving in and figuring out how to do this very personal form of art safely, and putting different layers of safety in there. Obviously, the number one is masks. In our building, all masks all the time. Anybody who is in the building has a mask on, and then it's scaling up that PPE from there. So if we're encountering, one of the scenarios we ran is if we've got an unmasked actor in a show, how do we protect the crew backstage? And so that is not only having the crew member masked, but then layering in a face shield, potentially goggles, gloves, making sure that we're keeping everybody as safe as possible. Physical distancing is also another big component to that. So, the production meetings that we have weekly involve probably 25 to 30 people, and normally we're sitting shoulder to shoulder around a very large conference table. We don't do that anymore. It's it's all on Zoom. When we do have meetings in person, it is definitely spaced out. Really just figuring out each and every level of safety and coming up with contingency plans of how we deal with that. With entrance protocols for rehearsals, disinfecting props before they enter a rehearsal hall, once they come out, all of those different levels. We've invested a lot in cleaning and disinfecting. Don't want to turn it into an infomercial for Clorox, but the Clorox 360 system is kind of the base of our cleaning protocols. It's a electrostatic cleaning sprayer that essentially wraps around all of the objects that it touches so that we can disinfect even in hard to reach places and make sure that all of those surfaces are safe to touch. So it's definitely a layered approach and lots of collaboration both in Milwaukee with other arts organizations as well as nationally across the country.
Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, please, Mike. No, take it away.
I was just going to say, there's a lot of organizations that have tried to put together protocols in an effort to get the unions on board and go along with this. I mean, I have to say the Rep's protocol, which is on the Rep website for those who are listening, you can actually drill down from the Q&A and read the entire thing. It's impressive. And maybe it's just that, Milwaukee did a better job. But what is your sense of why Equity, which has been unwilling to approve any kind of in-person performance almost anywhere in the country, including places like the American Shakespeare Company in Virginia, which had a very, very low COVID rate, much lower than Wisconsin, and had actors living in a bubble, it would not approve there. It has rejected most applications for live performance. What was it that allowed us, meaning the Rep, to put Equity in a position where it could feel safe signing off on this?
Sure. So I just want to preface that with, we have conditional approval from Equity. They still reserve the right for the final sign off. And obviously where we stand now in Wisconsin, it is a very tricky situation because our numbers are not where we would like them to be. We feel like we have, and thank you for that compliment, Mike. I think our plan is comprehensive and well put together. So I think we've got a great plan. I think the performance, the production that we're looking at is a great choice because we're looking at one actor on stage supported by one musician who is physically separated from that actor by essentially a plexiglass shield. But right now the climate is really challenging. You read the news today and it's, talking about Wisconsin being the epicenter of this outbreak in the Midwest. And, that is a challenge, but, we've been very proactive and collaborative with all of our union partners to find out what steps we need to take, what we need to put in place, to make this a plan that people feel comfortable with and can sign off on. So it is, it really just ties back to that collaboration and, working with the people that we have advising our plan. Dr. Mark Needfelt has been a huge, huge help to us, developing our testing protocols and double checking everything. We recently reached out to Dr. Cassidy, the director of epidemiology at the Medical College of Wisconsin, so that she could review our plan and, kind of pick things apart and go back into it. We're constantly assessing the plan and making changes where we need to try and stay on the forefront and make sure that we're doing things as safely as we can, because we know that we're in the spotlight and that people's eyes are on us. And we want to make sure that we do everything the right way, that we're thinking through these decisions and we're not rushing into getting back into producing. We want to find the safest way possible to produce. And at the end of the day, we're never going to be able to eliminate all of the risks that are associated with this. It is, there's too many to count, but we can mitigate those risks to what we feel is an acceptable level to try and get people in the entertainment industry back to work.
It's remarkable just listening to you describe all of the different types of steps that you have taken and that you're going to be taking, just because it seems like a crash course for anyone who's wondering what it's been like to be in our industry for these last 7+ months, where suddenly we are becoming experts or pseudo experts in things that we really did not have to think about before, and to build new roadmaps. And it, we've certainly here at Forward, and I know colleagues across the country have been delving into all of these different issues, but also really leaning on the handful of companies like Milwaukee Rep that have kind of gotten out in front of this and really put the time and the resources into plans as thorough as yours, so that we can all be very invested in your success. Those of you who are listening to this can't see me crossing both of my fingers, because if we want this to work and to be a roadmap for the rest of us to be able to return to in-person work in ways in which, as you say, the risk is mitigated down to what we would consider a normal level of risk in any sort of employment work. But yeah, cleaning and air ventilation and, rapid testing, these are not typical responsibilities for a production manager.
Yeah, I know more about, alcohol content of cleaners and the amount of time that you need to leave a disinfectant on a surface to actually disinfect it than I ever thought I would.
Jared, that prompts a question for me. It's 175, right? Is the cap on 150, 175 in terms of the number of people? Is that
180 right now with the new restriction, the current 25% occupancy? Yes.
And to that point about disinfectant, was there thought about? I know there's currently 7 2-show days planned, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Was there thought about not having 2-show days because of the challenges of disinfecting between shows, or is that something that's manageable given the research that you've done?
Yeah, so we did definitely look into that, and we did need to adjust our start times to make sure that we had enough space in between the end of the first show and the start of the second show, so that we can get the maximum number of air exchanges in our audience chamber, basically flushing it with fresh air from the outside, using as much fresh air as the system can handle. Obviously being in Wisconsin, the temperature is getting a little bit colder, so we can't do 100% outside air. But
why not? Put on a jacket.
Flushing the air is definitely one part of it, and then the second part is that disinfectant. And with this Clorox 360 system, we're able to deploy 2 of those units into the Powerhouse Theater, and I think we've got it now where within roughly 90 minutes we can cover the entire theater in this disinfectant fog, basically. And then it takes about 10 or 15 minutes to dry, and then we're ready to turn over the house to a new set of patrons. So yeah, definitely patron safety is, at the top of the list. Not something that I deal with directly, but have actually, been coordinating with our director of marketing and communications to develop audience partitions, so that when people are lining up to get into the theater, they're separated by a piece of plexiglass. We actually tasked our scene shop with building all of these pieces so that we can have plexiglass separating the folks at the gift shop window between the patrons coming in, so that we do have an area if somebody does come to the theater and they do have their temperature is not where we would like it to be, above 100.4. We do have a waiting area where that we can put those people away from the rest of the audience, give them a chance to cool down. Maybe they had to run from their car to get into the line, and then we can go back and rescreen them, take their temperature again, and see if it is below that 100.4 level. To get it in. So yeah, it is, the number of steps that we're taking, both front of house and back of house, is a little mind-boggling. But you take it one piece at a time and just layer those safety protocols one on top of each other to make sure that we've got a plan that we believe in.
Who do you have taking those temperatures, the patron temperatures? And then conversely, who's doing it on the production end, like for every rehearsal?
Yeah, so we actually are just rolling out this week a new standalone temperature unit. So essentially it's mounted on a wall, and you can stand in front of it and either take your temperature on your forehead or your wrist. And it'll read out. But for our patrons, we have our front of house staff will be there to make sure that folks are coming in. Normally, we rely on quite a bit of volunteer help to manage our audiences. Because we're dealing with a much lower number now at that 180, we're cutting back on the number of volunteers that we have, and almost exclusively going to paid front of house personnel to deal with that, just because the level of training that they need has increased, so that they can, spot potentially symptomatic people, that they're trained in conflict resolution, being able to diffuse situations. I think we've all experienced situations where, people may not want to wear a mask when they come in. Everybody's required to wear a mask when they come in to see our shows for the health and safety of everybody involved. This is definitely a team effort, and we have to think beyond just ourselves and what is good for the community that we live in.
Yeah,
I would like to think that theater audiences know that, are coming in and wearing masks, but certainly we've talked about that, Jen, internally, like, who's in charge of making sure, or of reprimanding, or whatever it looks like, the audience member who is watching the show, enjoying it, and takes off their mask.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot too. Just dealing with employees that we work with, and we have to remind everybody that this is something new that everybody's experiencing, and we can't make assumptions that people are doing it with bad intentions. That we say we want to try and correct people with grace, give people the benefit of the doubt, but it is a very important part of our plan that everybody is masked while they're in our building. So we will be requiring that.
Jared, what kind of audience? I mean, of course, you've got Lee Ernst, who's a Wisconsin legend, and is going to be a draw regardless. But in terms of, even with all these safety protocols in place, where's the audience been at in terms of sales? And number one, and secondly, is there going to be a streaming option made available to people who really want to see this show but maybe aren't comfortable coming in person?
Sure. So the Jacob Marley's Christmas Carol is kind of standalone from the rest of our reset season, which is happening in the spring. For Jacob Marley's Christmas Carol, currently the plan is to only provide live and in person, and not a streaming option for that, because we are fortunate that we've had a couple of really generous donors that are making our 2016 production of A Christmas Carol available for free for people to be able to stream. So that we're offering that as our streaming option. And then Jacob Marley's Christmas Carol will be our live and in-person option. As far as ticket sales go, I don't have the specifics of how the demographics break down, but I do know that, when we put this show on sale, we ended up selling more tickets than we had projected originally. And we found that there is a core group of people that are really interested in getting back into that live performance aspect of things. And whether or not that's because, maybe they've already contracted COVID and they think that they have some level of immunity at this point, or, they feel safe with the safety protocols that are out there and being masked. And, we have physical distancing in our auditorium. But yeah, the response has been very, very good. We're very happy with that. And, we look forward to welcoming people back into our facility.
That raises a related question. Was there thought to, I know, like the Geffen, the Goodman, the Guthrie, all the G's are all going with streaming versions of Carol, and only streaming versions of Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Was there thought given, notwithstanding the amazingly eloquent statement that your executive director, Chad Bauman, wrote about the value of live theater, was there thought about not trying to put something like this out, but going the way of, say, the Old Vic or other companies that are just putting out a streaming season rather than trying to do all the incredible things you've tried to do to make this happen?
Yeah, that has been a conversation central to our operations from the beginning. It was really a conversation about, we're going to have to put in a lot of effort to come up to develop this safety plan, to come up with a way to bring live theater back. And is it worth it? And frankly, we made the decision that it was really important for us to try and provide employment opportunities for our staff. There are a lot of organizations out there that have, looked around at the landscape and said, you know what? We're just gonna step back, and maybe they have resources that allow them to kind of sit out a season. But we felt it was really important to push forward and try and set the bar for what the future of theater is going to look like, and really, I don't think we ever thought about, well, we want to be the first ones out of the gate. But it was, how do we operate and live in this new reality? How do we keep our people employed for as long as possible and as safely as possible? So that has been a question that we have talked about internally, probably since late March. After the initial shock of what is this? What are we doing? How long is this going to last? Came about. And that was part of the budgeting process going into this season, looking at many different scenarios. And we did consider an option that would have had us essentially shutting down and not producing anything until the fall of 21. And, it was pretty grim, to be honest. And we really pushed forward to try and keep people employed and keep the arts alive in our community.
No, the whole process of trying to plan, of making a plan and then having to do a new plan and then another new plan, the scenarios, dear Lord, the scenarios and the flow charts for all of us over these past 7+ months have been staggering. And I'm curious, as you reflect back on what this period has been like for you or for the rep in general, is there something that springs to mind as a particularly big, victory or a particularly big hurdle? What have felt like the big peaks or the big valleys in this process? Because as we can all attest, it is such a day by day slog, and then you win one day and then you lose one another day, and we just we keep on keeping on. But I'm curious, what has struck you as being the highest peaks and the lowest lows?
What a great question, and so hard to answer.
Yeah. Sorry.
There are some days where it feels like it's the same day over and over and over again. I'm sure that many people can relate to that. And it feels like every time we get to one of those, endpoints, you look and it's like, oh, there's another hill, and yet another hill that you have to climb. And so I think there were definitely many points along the way as we developed our budget and plan moving into this season. I guess one of the high points would definitely be kind of, and it's never really finished, but kind of the first iteration that we created of our safety plan. Once we had submitted to all of the different unions and Equity was the last union that we brought it to. The culmination of that felt really great. That
Sure.
Look, this is something that we've accomplished. And at the same time, it's just one more milestone along the way. And the fact that document is living and breathing, and we're constantly, even today, going back and looking at it and saying, okay, with the new information that we know, how do we need to change this? At one point we assumed that we could do rehearsals as we had done before in our rehearsal hall facilities on the 4th floor of our building. When we dug into it, we found out that the way that the HVAC system was designed back in the late 80s doesn't allow for an adequate number of air exchanges in there. And so we had to kind of like, okay, if we can't use our rehearsal facilities, where do we go? Well, we've got 3 venues, and it just so happens that we're really focusing on the Quadracci Powerhouse for most of our performances. And so we actually turned our Steam Key Studio Theater into a rehearsal hall, and, just making those changes and finding whatever challenges lay before you and figuring out what the solution is. It almost feels like an endless treadmill, but, you definitely have to celebrate the victories where you can, and deal with the defeats, learn a lesson, and move on and try not to dwell on it.
Are there particular things that you're hoping to learn from this Christmas Carol production? Because I know you've got, the rest of the season reset happening in the late winter and then into the spring. And are there particular things that you're all kind of really looking at to see how they go, so that can influence how the rest of the season plays out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff that we have, gamed out. We've had lots of conversations. We've written out different scenarios on paper and kind of, talked through how is this going to work. But this is our first real opportunity to put it into practice. Every time we bring folks back into the building. So at the end of May into June was the first time that we were able to bring folks back into the building for a short 2-week window to kind of button up the season. And that's really where we put our entrance protocols to the test. Does this work? Can we deal with a line of people coming in through our door? Right now, we've got one way into our building and one way out. so that we can control that flow of traffic. And, before we actually tested it out with people, we weren't quite certain it was, going to play out the way that we wanted it to. So yeah, there's just about every factor in our plan, running it through a real world test to make sure that it's doing what we want it to do. And, obviously having the latitude to make adjustments on the fly and really look to make changes in real time so that we are keeping up with the data and keeping everybody as safe as possible.
Oh,
I muted myself for a second. Look at that. That's a really, really well articulated set of goals there, Jared. And I mean it when I say I think the folks rooting for this to all go smoothly stretches far beyond the boundaries of Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
We are all eager to get back into production and to find ways that we can do it to protect the health and also the livelihoods of everybody in our industry and in our audiences. So I'm so grateful to you.
We'll take all the positive energy we can get.
it was one of the.
Thank you for leading the way. Sorry,
it was
Mike.
one of the best days I've had since March, the day that the announcement came out from the rep saying this was going forward. Do you want to give for our listeners, Jared? Can you just give us the dates of the production?
Oh, sure. Putting me on the spot now. Yeah, I just need to look at a calendar.
I know it's December, but I can't remember when in December.
Yeah, it is. It is the very beginning of December.
Okay.
So we start. Our public performances are slated to start Tuesday, December 1st, and then it'll run through December 24th, I believe.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll definitely plug for our listeners. I've seen both the 4-person version of this Jacob Marley, which Acacia Theater did, and also the 1-person version at Third Avenue Playhouse a few years ago. It's a fun show and very different from, I think, for people, especially now that I know we're going to have this streaming option. Watch both, folks. I mean, the juxtaposition of the new, Christmas Carol that Mark Clemens put together, and then seeing this is going to be wild and wonderful.
Yeah, it is a really fun piece, and we reached out directly to Tom Mula, the playwright, and he's really excited that this piece is getting produced again, and it's definitely a different take on the story of A Christmas Carol.
Well, God bless us, everyone.
Nicely done, Jen. Yes.
Why don't we say that is it for this episode of Theater Forward, a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. Our thanks to Jared for this great discussion and to all of you for joining us. I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray.
I'm Julie Swenson.
And I'm Mike Fisher. Our podcast is produced by Scott Hayden. You can follow us or share your thoughts on Facebook or Twitter at Theater Forward. As always, and this is true of the Milwaukee Rep as well, theater is with an ER, people.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you might tune in. And be sure to leave a review. We'd love to hear from you.
We're so grateful to have you listening, and we will be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.